Space, the final frontier. Well, okay, not really. All right, take two. Here in the Mitten State, welcome to Code 47, bringing you all things Star Trek, spanning the quadrants, the best thing since the neutral zone.
Back again on the Secret Friends Unite podcast network. This is Code 47, all things about Star Trek, episode 133. I am your humble servant, Trek Lord of West Michigan, Charlie Carden, joined as always by my stalwart companion, Mr. Peter Stein. Peter, good afternoon. How are you today?
Good afternoon. Doing all right.
Rock and roll. Well, cool. We've got some stuff to break down today, talking Prodigy, more episodes. We're getting closer to the end. And again, that show has now been out there 3 full months now. But there's no way we can cover all 20 episodes that got dropped in a single segment. I did actually purchase it, and I don't know if this is still the case, but if you go to Fandango, which used to be Vudu, which is how I purchased digital content, the second season, all 20 episodes, was available for $10. So I did pick it up.
Oh, nice.
So now I have what is ostensibly the entire series on digital, which is good because we all know streaming is pretty treacherous. So it's on Netflix now. What if it's not on Netflix, 6 months from now when the contract expires? You don't know.
I pre-ordered the physical release, which will be in November.
Very smart. Gotcha. So, and then we're jumping back in to talk about Voyager, and we have some, but not a bunch of news about Star Trek Day, which was last week, Sunday, which to me makes it feels like maybe that's why we didn't get much, because it was a weekend. Because I remember not 3 or 4 years ago when it was on a weekday, it was a big event. It was a red carpet. There were people doing bits and segments and panels.
It was a big deal last time.
Yeah. But to see it this year, to have just a couple of items just really didn't wow me. But anyway, we will talk about what we have. But first, as always, I get to the portion which I fondly refer to as paying the bills. But really, it's a pleasure to give homage to the wonderful people on our Secret Friends Unite Patreon Friend Squad. If you visit patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite, you can try out our wares for 7 full days at no charge. Exclusives to that would be this show right here drops a couple of days early. This drops a Saturday before the Monday free release of this program. You also get ad-free versions of our other shows, other fun Discord benefits, including our now monthly Patreon-only Hangout Discord chat, which actually we are recording in a couple of weeks here. So very exciting. There's also a great new monthly bonus program by my partner Mark called Walk Nerdy With Me. He just dropped the second segment of that. And again, you get to try it out for 7 days at no cost at patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. On our besties level, Chris 1H1D, great guy. Derek Trevelyan, the figure dude, buddy of mine here in Grand Rapids. Wonderful Francie, my wife's hairdresser. Mr. Xbox Expansion Pass Luke Lore, great guy. And my Uncle Tim, my staunchest supporter in my family, besides my lovely wife. So very grateful for all of you. On our Friends with Benefits level, John Sedorf, the awesome Phoenix Sisters Entertainment, our pals Kelly and Crayley. Brendan Myers, Corey and HD, and Matthew Keel. And at the top of the pyramid, for whom with there would be none, the awesome Nias family of the Twin Cities, Sean, Stella, and Henry. Very grateful for all of your patronage on Patreon. Patronage on Patreon. But one more time, patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. Try us out, see how you like us, and then feel free to stick around because we would love to have you. All right, commercial over. Moving on to, as I was talking about Star Trek Day, the much ballyhooed, this was, here's something interesting I learned this year, Peter. I don't know if you caught this, but I saw a post, and I guess I didn't do much digging, so I guess I'm repeating unverified news, which is, of course, something that happens a lot these days. But that September 8th of 1966 is when The Man Trap aired on NBC. It was a Thursday night, as I recall. But either the previous day or the day before that, it aired in Canada. So really, Star Trek Day is the 6th or the 7th, maybe in Canada, and very weird. have any idea why that would be the case. I feel like this is something that either you and I need to look into, which we'll probably forget, or better yet, somebody who's following us on social media will drop us a line on Instagram or Threads or in our Discord chat and let us know. Because I'd love to get a little bit more information. Unless Peter, something springs to mind for you.
Nothing springs immediately to mind. It seems unlikely to me that Star Trek would have aired earlier in Canada rather than the United States, just because it was filmed here and it was the 60s.
Right.
It's possible.
Right. Some kind of weird quirk.
It seems to me kind of like some. Yeah.
Yeah,
someone wanting to be special.
Somebody trying to manifest. What is it that the hipsters say these days? You're trying to
manifest your truth.
Yeah. Manifest your truth. Yeah, you're trying to manifest your truth retroactively 58 years in the past. I don't know, but
it's possible. But it just seems unlikely based on my knowledge of how things worked back then.
I'm curious, but I'm also not curious enough to probably remember to look it up. So again, somebody listening to the show, please feel free. If you're on our Discord, drop a note. If you follow us over on Facebook or on our Instagram or Threads, I'm at the C3. Drop me a line at any of those places. I definitely love to hear, because I get the feeling we're talking about it now, but I get the feeling we'll forget. So if it was that important, we probably remember it. So, but anyway, talking about Star Trek Day, it was past week on a Sunday. And as I'd mentioned a moment ago, there was really no fanfare to speak of. The only things that we saw were kind of pre-positioning the imminent launch of the final season of Star Trek Lower Decks, which is going to happen early next month in October. No, you know what? I got that wrong. October 24, I think, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, I'd have to verify the date, but it is later in October that is happening. We did get what I'm assuming is from the first episode, maybe the very beginning of the first episode, which is a clip of our beloved Tendi, who's one of our main characters, who we did see, spoiler alert, sorry, at the end of the final season, returning to her Orion roots and becoming a pirate in exchange for her, the Syndicate's help in whatever the crisis was in that episode. I'm forgetting because it was over a year ago, so I apologize. But yes, you see her executing a heist, an undercover operation here, where she's using a little bit of hollow fakery to mask her appearance. It's a fun clip. You can find it by visiting, as we report most things, trekmovie.com. It's currently the top story, and that's fun to watch. And then we did get a piece of key art, which also, because I'm on their what's the list I'm looking for? What's that thing that I get, the screeners that I get? I also get a key. So I got that key piece of art. And much like they've done in previous seasons, they'll take their key art and they'll mirror it to the corresponding numbered Star Trek film. So we're up to the 5th season. So they have a key piece of art that's mirroring the poster of the much reviled Star Trek V from 1989, which is fun. I'd like that touch. This is the final season of the show. I've got bad news to all the people out there who might think that signing a petition is going to make any difference, because it does not. Now, that did work in the 60s with letter writing campaigns, but Peter, unless I'm very much mistaken, doing a petition at petition.org or putting it on a Facebook post, I don't think anybody really cares.
I mean, they get noticed, but they don't necessarily move anything unless there's like massive numbers.
Right.
Oh, we've got like 1,000 people. Nobody cares.
Right. Or 5 or whatever it is. Yeah. So.
Even if you got like 10,000 people, you're not gonna move the executives very much.
Yeah. And I couldn't speak directly as to why the show is ending. When someone says, "Oh, the show's canceled, bring the show back," you don't simply know that the show is.
Sometimes shows end because the creator wants it to end before they run out of ideas. Like, for instance, Star Wars Rebels did the same thing.
Yeah.
Gravity Falls on the Disney Channel did the same thing. It ran for 2 seasons and 2 seasons only on purpose, because that was the story they wanted to tell. And I'm much happier with this show to end rather than getting dragged out for money. And then you end up with something like Once Upon a Time or Castle, where you have they don't know where they're going towards the end of the show.
That was Lost. That was the show Lost, which I don't think you
I've
watched.
seen Lost.
You have seen it. Okay.
The last season was Yeah. It was a trip and a half.
And that's a show that got wrapped around the writer's strike, and I think it was in 07 or 08, and just really threw things into disarray. So that's not surprising. But anyway, we don't know for a fact that everybody's contract wrapped up and people were just ready to move on. That kind of thing happens too. So all of the anguish about, oh my God, don't take my show away. Sometimes things just end.
As Q said, all good things must come to an end.
You're right. Every only 2 of the 12 Star Trek shows have been, 3 have been canceled. The original series, the original animated series, and Enterprise, if I'm not mistaken. The other shows, I believe, just
Discovery
ended.
technically got canceled.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, because April and I were on the cruise last year, and Doug Jones was a guest. He had a panel on the same day that he got he even told the story in the panel that he got an urgent note for a Zoom call that was early that morning that they let them know the show was ending. So yeah, I guess more to the point, Star Trek has a better track record of simply ending on their own terms as opposed to being canceled. But yes, it's a balancing act. So
it's never fun to see something that you like end, but sometimes they have to, and that does allow them to move on to do other things.
Right, exactly. So. It's the same argument that I made with The Acolyte over in the Star Wars world, which, hey, look, I talk about this show a lot over on our Holocron Chronicles show. That show ended because, unfortunately, it wasn't very popular. So it does then release resources to create other things. And in a pantheon like Star Trek, we now have characters that can move on to occupy other programs.
You could see, live action Boimler and Mariner show up in, I don't know, if they decide to do something with a Star Trek legacy, we could see those characters.
Right, exactly. And yeah, with time travel, they could end up on Strange New Worlds again. You just don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So the only other thing that I thought was noteworthy, because I personally signed up for it, is that I've talked in the past, and I've had pictures on my social media. Peter, you've seen it coming over to my house. I've got a beautiful curio cabinet that's lit with the glass backing that I was always very proud that I got it at this company my wife used to work for. Had a warehouse sale, and this was an old display case. I have all of my Eagle Moss ships, and Eagle Moss, a British company that produced smaller Star Trek ship models between 2013 and about 2 years ago, when they unceremoniously went out of business and took $200 of my money with it because I had something on order. But a new company has picked up the torch and is producing new models. They're called Fan Home. I don't know all the intricacies of the connection. They are starting their line with a promise of 20 ships of a similar scale to the quote-unquote regular Eagle Moss line, which is ships between 6 and 9 inches long typically, and a larger line, which they're only 3 or 4 inches bigger, yet they cost $25, $30 more. So not a lot of excitement there. But I did commit to the initial run of the 20 ships because, they're producing ships such as the Titan from Picard Season 3, which is then later the Enterprise G, also from Picard Season 3, the Shrike from that 3rd season, the Stargazer from the 2nd season of that show, and the Enterprise, what did we say, the F?
F,
which I have
technically from Star Trek Online, but made its canon appearance in Picard season
for all of about 5 seconds before it got blown up. So yes,
I don't know if it got blown up, but it got completely disabled.
Yeah, exactly. So so I'm looking forward to that. You can visit their website. So Fan Home, obviously search for Star Trek. There are a series of collector gifts that come with that, which is very similar to Eagle Moss. So I believe there's a dedication plaque for the Titan. There's an exclusive coffee mug and some different stuff.
I do love some dedication plaques. I don't have it, but I do like them.
I do. I have. Well, you've been to my house. The half bath I have on my first floor. I have. It was funny because I live in the house I grew up in. We bought it from my mother several years ago, and she had little shelves hung in that bathroom that I took a dedication plaque for each of the 4 shelves, and they're all Enterprise dedication plaques, and I put my different Enterprises in front of them. Nice. So I need to add the F and the G to these shelves. I got to cram them in there.
I am curious to see which ships they go for next, because Eagle Moss did a lot of them.
Yeah, I have the vast majority of what they produce, though.
Yeah. I don't have any of them.
Yeah,
but I do love starships. I'm curious if perhaps they will, because Star Trek Online actually did a run of this for a little bit, where you would be able to create your own ship. So it would be interesting, because it's not that hard print wise, to just because you already have the models. Just have a service where it just when they print the ship, it just prints the name different. It'd be
Very
interesting for folks to have, here's my favorite starship, but it's mine.
So like the Grand Petoskey.
Exactly. Everyone wants their own custom. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people want their own custom starships because that's fun.
Good deal.
Have your adventures, and now your ship's on your shelf.
Well, go ahead and sign up for that. Naturally, with inflation, the price has risen. Your standard model is, I think, in the $40 range, but whatever. It's once a month. It's a nice collectible, and if you're someone who enjoys models, it'll be something that you always enjoy. So I encourage you to go do that. Peter, we should reach out to these guys, see if we can, cut a deal. Maybe we can get like a code or something and do some business with them. I love that idea. But anyway, we'll move out of that and we'll move into the first segment of our show where we're talking about the next 3 episodes of the second season of Star Trek Prodigy. Peter, if you would be so kind to kick us off.
All right. Am I doing both of these at the same time?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense to me. So you do 15 and 16, and then I'll handle 17. So go for it.
All right. So we've got episodes 15 and 16, Ascension, parts 1 and 2. In part 1, just as the Protostar and Voyager crews bring their mission to a close, more or less, a former enemy suddenly resurfaces with surprising new powers. Oh no. In part 2, overwhelmed by Essensia's mysteriously advanced weaponry, the Protostar and Voyager crews take a series of calculated risks that endanger the cadets.
That's what kids are there for. Always the trouble. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, good stuff. All right. Well, take us through it. What do you think? It's a great 2-parter. I have my own notes.
It's a fantastic 2-parter. There's some fun stuff in there. I think this is the episode where we get a really funny little reference from Chakotay where they're talking about like things might be over, and he looks at Janeway and says it's been a long road. I thought
I loved it.
I was rolling on the floor with that one. Like, I know that most people don't care for that, but I thought it was great. There was some really good moments with Dahl being 1, following orders, and 2, being accepted into part of another team and working with that team.
Right. This
not
is
trying to take control.
Yeah, actual nice growth, not him just being a regulation smartass, which is kind of his stock in trade. Yeah, I agree with that.
So there was some excellent stuff there. You saw Chakotay take charge with the rest of the gang and taking care of the Protostar and using it to great effect against this time weapon, which the thing that they ended up doing was very similar to the one Deep Space Nine episode where you had the torpedo embedded in the ship.
It was I know that it actually reminded me of a different one. You're thinking of the Starship Down, which was in season 4
with Quark has to disable it.
Yeah, and actually his guest star in that scene with him was an alien played by James Cromwell, who was there from Cochrane.
Yep.
I noted that it reminded me of another Voyager episode. I think it was in season 2 called Maneuvers, with a Kazon dagger ship that just jammed into a cargo bay, and then it was a sneak attack.
There's a lot of similarities to a bunch of episodes.
Yeah. So I really love that deal. Some of my notes from part 1, I did like that the Lurian cadet, which is Morn's race, was Grom. So you just mix the letters up a little bit, and that he gets told to cut out, or she gets told to cut out the chit chat. I didn't even notice that that was a female.
They said it like twice, but it's really hard to tell.
I mean, it just
again, it's the thing of the Lurians are supposed to have hair.
Yeah, right.
But everyone's like, oh, well, Morn doesn't have hair.
Well, maybe this was another one that
doesn't have hair because
he has a belly
full of latinum. They said that explicitly. Yeah, but every time we've seen another of his species and newer stuff, they don't have hair. It's like, okay.
I grabbed 2 weird costume anomalies from the first part. I loved how Janeway explained that they were talking about the episode Endgame, which was the Voyager series
that was
finale.
Also really funny.
Yeah, talking about how that uniform influence the style that she's currently wearing. So I'm like, because that uniform that we see in that episode is the same one from the final episode of TNG, which takes place in the future that doesn't technically exist. It's an alternate. It's always the alternate alternate reality uniform, but it becomes reality because of that experience, which I think is awesome. But then there was a weird handoff because Janeway gives Chakotay an updated comm badge to put on his old uniform. So it's like he didn't change his uniform, but he changed his comm badge. But the badge has no backing, but it sticks to his chest when he puts it there. So I'm wondering, is the uniform magnetic in some way? Because why did it stick to him?
That's the conceit in most Star Trek shows with the comm badge, is that they just kind of attach through some sort of,
they're kind of like
fancy sealant.
Little webs, little spider web, like Spider-Man's fingers.
Auto Velcro without the need for the patch.
I would almost change the name of the episode to Auto Velcro. So there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Auto Velcro patch. All right, what else? Keep talking to me.
Another interesting thing is we get a redesigned little one-person fighter, for lack of a better term, which was apparently redesigned by Lieutenant Paris, which also
snuck it in funny. There. Yes.
So we got another reference there. And these were, in the beginning of the episode, we see the normal Nova Squadron flying those ships and attempting a different kind of starburst. It's not a Colvord starburst because it's just the three of them, but it's a very, very similar maneuver.
Right. And it becomes at least when we get into the second part.
Yeah, it's a Boothby starburst. Nova.
Boothby Nova, yeah.
It's like, Boothby gets a maneuver named after him. That's fun.
Yeah, they make a real, closer to the end of the part one, they make this real Hail Mary play to blow the ship, blow up this. They face this enemy vessel, which is just like, it's too big. It's too
kind
big.
Of like, it felt to me a lot like,
was it the Vengeance from
like
the JJ films?
It felt like the Naradra from the first JJ movie.
Yeah, and
it's just this massive spiky thing that.
And I said it reminded me of a Jem'Hadar fighter flipped on its end. If you look at it, it's because of how it functioned, especially its energy draining weapon coming from the center. It reminded me of two different things. Yeah,
it reminded me of the Darkness from Babylon 5. Because they had ships that kind of look like this.
Yeah.
And then it also reminded me of the Reapers from Mass Effect, which newer Star Trek has been borrowing from heavily.
Right.
If you listen to me at all about Picard season 1, 2, and 3, there's been some heavy Mass Effect borrowing.
And they did. And speaking of borrowing, I did. And again, we're closer to the end of the first episode. That big sequence with all the flying around. I even think some of the VFX and SFX sounded like it came from Clone Wars. It sounded like Republic ships flying around. So, but you know what? It again,
nothing wrong with that. The only sound effect nitpick that I have, which shows up more in the third episode out of these, is they keep using the Starship phaser sound for the hand phasers. It's too beefy.
Yeah, too beefy. It's too beefy. That's almost a better name for the episode. It's too beefy. Yeah, there we go.
Let me change too beefy.
Yeah,
don't do that.
Yeah, it's too beefy. Don't do that. Let me change that. It's too beefy.
But the hand phasers have a slightly weaker and higher pitch, and so it's a very, very, very minor nitpick, but because I help with some audio stuff, I'm aware of these things.
Absolutely.
That's not the hand phaser.
I get it. It's like me with the uniform stuff, and I know you're very much the same. I'm very particular about like weird, like the comm badge. And I'm like, I did notice one last bit I had in the first part is they tried a Hail Mary play with blowing up the enemy ship, and it reminded me very much of the Valiant episode of DS9, where there was a huge explosion. And then when it dissipated, the ship was undamaged. So they were just like, crap.
It also felt a little bit like Independence Day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, launching the nuke, and then it was just, we nuke Houston, but the ship is still there. So
again, there's no problem with borrowing. It's just interesting to note what things feel similar.
Right. And again, you remember the set of eyes that are looking at all of this are the eyes of children because it's on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, that was not necessarily going to be aware of that sort of thing.
That was one thing I noted because I watched my now purchased copies of it instead of watching it on Netflix. And they edit the beginning different. They said, you're watching Nickelodeon, or they, presented by Nickelodeon. They have a green screen, which is just a green slime from, I don't know if you have any familiarity with where green slime and Nickelodeon comes from, but there was a show, it's actually a Canadian produced show called You Can't Do That on Television. That was one of the very first things that Nickelodeon showed in the early 80s that I was absolutely in love with. That's where the slime comes from. So it makes me chuckle. But anyway, and then they jump right into, they don't have the Star Trek, thing flying around with the koala. Yeah, they skip that, and then they do a very abbreviated version of the intro, which is totally fine. All right, well, we jump into the second part. Like I said, lots of, we're picking up where we left off. We're totally screwed. Lots of space fighting going on. And like I said, it's a big crowd. It's a crowd pleaser for the kids who are used to watching Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff. So you're going for where you need it to be. I did note in particular that I love Murph is going pew, pew, pew. He's saying that as he's shooting,
pew. Yeah,
which is awesome. And it's particularly funny because it's D. Bradley Baker, who is the voice of every clone in the Clone Wars. Yeah. It's absolutely fantastic. So, we already talked about the big missile. You said I said the Kazon dagger from Voyager. You said it was like the missile that crashed into the Defiant. So good stuff. Lots of back and forth.
And also they had an interesting character development moment with Zero.
Yeah.
Where Zero decided, because the weapon was emitting chronoton particles that were causing everyone to rapidly age if they entered into the shuttle bay.
Right.
And so Zero, whose body was already failing, decided to go in there and change the targeting computer so it went after Magel's ship, and then they got it to go crash into the main enemy vessel and blow up.
They did the big,
You also had, like, at the beginning of part 1, you had the Doctor, Zero, and Jankum all talking about, like, this body might fail, so we should, we have enough synthetic stuff that there's been enough advances, we could create one that works just like this, and you just come up with some design. And Zero's like, I want Jankum to work on it because I like him.
Yeah.
Trust him, he's my friend, sort of deal.
We're the squad. Yeah.
And so in part of part 2, you have Jankum in engineering and on the Protostar using the 3D replicator basically to create a body. And at the end of part 2, we get to see Zero's new body that looks very much like the original.
Right. It
has extra lights and also has sensation.
Right. So it's almost like an exoskeleton. Like I'm looking for a comparison here.
I mean, it's the exact same suit that Zero had before. So,
but now he has tactile stuff, so it's like Michelle can come up, she strokes his chest, I get for his she strokes
like the side of his head more or less.
And you see his hands, he's got it looks like he's got little keyboard hands. He's got little
blue sensors and everything. So it's interesting though, because it's once again the emphasis on the positivity of physical interaction and physical existence, which is something that old Star Trek wouldn't do with non-corporeal life forms, because being an energy-based life form is a higher mode of existence, whereas Prodigy is interestingly leaning more on the fact that being who you are is a good thing, and it's kind of a nice little change there,
and it really speaks to the overall message of what Star Trek Intolerance is all about: being who you are, and being who you are cooperatively with other people, not being I'm up here and you're down there, which would which be a wolf. I'm an energy being that.
Which is kind of where the non-corporeals tend to lean.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that is a nice change. I didn't think about it in that way. So, we do get so now Jellicoe, Admiral Jellicoe comes in and out of this. Yeah. In the beginning, he was like, "We're bringing you guys home because everybody's being reassigned because." You guys totally screwed stuff up. But now at the end of it, because of all this, Jellicoe comes back and says, nope, we're going to send you to Solum because we need the situation diffused and we want you guys to take care of it. So that was kind of a 180 turn you didn't necessarily expect from Starfleet, but it serves the plot line. But we do find out back on Solum that, I think we've been seeing it this whole time, because within the core ship, there's a hologram of Essentia, and she has poor Wesley as her prisoner. She captured him, which the beginning of the third segment, we kind of find out about that. But she has a great kind of metaphorical mustache twirling moment at the end where she goes, Starfleet is entirely unprepared for what comes next.
Yes.
I thought that was pretty great. So lumping these two together, I think I gave these an 8 and a 10 an 8 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10 because I just thought they rocked it. I didn't think
they were pretty darn good.
I think part 2 is better than part 1. But again, we've not had real duffer filler episodes.
No, everything's been close. Everything's been hovering around like 8, 9, 10.
They've been doing good. All right, well let me move on to 17, and we will take this home. So as episode 17 is Brink, as war looms between the Federation and Solum. Oh my gosh, this is just Federation war this, war that. Gwyn proposes to lead the cadets on an undercover mission to gather intelligence and rescue Iltheron. You know what? I always write Dad, so I never write Dad. Iltheron, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So this episode starts with a flashback. Wesley shows up as Essentia and her, minions are trying to build something, and he shows up.
The wormhole, and it wasn't working.
And he shows up and warns them not to, but then he gets captured. Right off the bat, we get a star date after the cold open, as it were, with a 6200 star date year, which is 2385, which is the framing sequence for the first season of Star Trek Picard, which is the disaster on Mars, which may or may not close out the season. Don't know. Could come back to you. Don't know. But anyway, that really jumped out at me, much like when I talked in our last episode. The star date indicated it was 2384, which is the 20-year mark from when the TNG era started in the first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, we're going back to Solum. She's putting together this kind of Mission Impossible squad, and Janeway gives them that speech. You're like, well, you're going. You're not condoned by Starfleet. If you get caught, you're shit out of luck. We can't help you out. So they go down, and where they materialize, we get a familiar scene of the little farms of spinning temporal weapons and stuff. So there's a lot of bad shit going on down there. I did like they have like kind of some James Bond style equipment going in. So they have this cloaking shield that somebody has to hold a emitter, and it's a lot like this. They're kind of like the Scooby-Doo gang trying to walk through the street, or
it feels kind of like
Harry Potter
/ Get Smart when they're doing that.
Yes,
funny.
But they immediately bump into an even younger version of Essentia, who heads up the uprising. So you got to, I tend to forget that the Essentia that we dealt with is from the future because of the. I really need to watch the first season again because of all the timey-wimey stuff.
I love time travel. It makes sense to me, but as for most people, they fall into Dow's particular complaint.
Yeah,
I hate time travel.
Exactly. There's every reason to do so, but. I thought it's funny when they have to split into teams, and the team that Z is with has to knock out a guard, but then other guards are approaching, so they kind of have to do a Weekend at Bernie's thing where they tip the other guard around the corner and try to make him nod his head.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Oh, Wesley finds out that the teams had split up, and he's freaking out. He says, "No, I was trying to tell you guys to always stay together because you weren't supposed to rescue, the dad guy because then it screws things up." And then everybody gets captured anyway because future Essentia had been scrambling Wesley's brain and knew everything that was going on. But at the last moment, Dahl chucks a transport enhancer in Wesley's direction, and the two of them get beamed up, but not the kids. And with Wesley, and Wesley collapses, and he says,
yes.
I don't know what's going to happen next. And so, yes, it's another cliffhanger that we walk into. But, wow, intense. So I gave this one a 9 out of 10. Every part of this does a great job of moving the story forward, but not in a way that you don't know what the hell's going on if you missed one. But then again, that's what's, I think, so pivotal about the fact that this is on Netflix and it all dropped at the same time, is that nobody's missing anything. Oh, I missed this episode, or I got to go back and do this. You just start from the beginning. They're 20 to 22 minute episodes, and it's really easy to blast your way on through it. So, your thoughts?
I don't really have a whole lot to add. I mean, it's a cool episode. There's an interesting bit where they talk about how Wesley's plan was this whole thing of getting captured and getting the Val Nakot bumped up in their technology. So everyone's freaking out that they have extra technology. And Wesley's like, well, that was part of the plan, remember? And everyone's like, no, I don't remember that.
Yes.
It was one of those like, Wesley, this was one of those things that you said in your head, but it did not come out. So
exactamundo.
So
yeah.
But the fun thing at the end is you get where things aren't going right. And so at the end, Wesley doesn't know how things are going to pan out, which is one of those like, okay, so we can build the tension again because we don't have a time traveling character who knows how things are going to work. So I kind of liked that little twist there in the end to make that work.
Exactly.
It's still fun to see Iltheron as a good character.
Yeah.
And he's still voiced by the same actor, which is I think is great.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of good stuff in here. Majel resigns her Starfleet cadetship.
I love that. Anybody can do that. Everybody knows that the policy of quitting Starfleet or the Academy in this case is you just throw your comm badge at somebody. I'm out.
You just drop your comm badge and your pips on a table and just be like, I go somewhere for a little bit. I'll be back maybe.
I'll take these. Thanks. Let me pip myself back up. Here's my badge with the sticky thing, but you can't see it. Yeah, it's very informal. It's funny because I was like, if you think about like the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars, that was all volunteer. Because and it was just understood because it's like an Empire. Luke's like, I got to go do a thing, or Han's like, I got to go page out of the hut or whatever. And then the general's like, well, sorry to hear it. Where if it was a real military, he'd be like, you're not going anywhere. And it's the same thing with Starfleet. Well, you follow orders. I'm not following orders. Here's my badge. Woo!
Yeah. So Starfleet functions like a military, but it doesn't have the same retention or
somebody doesn't really, you're not on for a 5-year hitch. And then if you leave, you
but that doesn't, you can't just throw your badge because you don't want to get in trouble. That's not how that works. You can't be like, I did a dumb thing and I'm going to now throw my badge on the table. You can't do that.
Right.
That's not how that works.
If you want to go fight in a Klingon civil war and then at the end of it, throw your badge on the table
before you do the dumb thing, that's different. But if you wear the badge, do the dumb thing, and then try to throw the badge, they don't let you do that. And that makes sense.
And if you're an android that goes schizo because somebody put some bad code in your head and then you're out of Starfleet, but then you can just come back. So, that was data. So, it doesn't really matter. The rules are kind of fuzzy. So, all right, well, next episode, we wrap up what is ostensibly this series because there has been no announcement.
There's been no announcement. Yeah. It's unlikely that we'll get a third season. It's possible. Well, everyone's like, we might. And it's like, well, the reason we got season 2 was it was pretty much already done.
Right.
And the only thing they had to do was, I think they just had to do some final renders and maybe do the score. And that was about it. So Netflix just had to do like a couple tweaks and then it was ready to go.
Right. Just
whereas
a little bit
season 3, they don't have anything. I don't think they even have like a season synopsis.
Right.
So that's a bit of a bigger ask. It's possible, but
I mean, the good news is with an animated show, it would be possible for this to be resurrected 5 or 10 years down the road, as opposed, and then have the characters just be like, well, we started our mission three weeks ago, and we're back again. That's possible. But then again, you also have some, burgeoning stars like Ella Purnell, for example, who went on and did Fallout, whose career's on the rise, and maybe this is not something that she'd want to keep doing. So you never know.
Yeah.
And the good news is, as we'll illustrate in our next episode, they picked a nice place to kind of leave this off. But again, we will talk about that next time. Peter, your rating for episode 17?
I would probably put this at a 9,
I think
8 or 9, somewhere in there.
I put it as it was pretty good. It had some fun moments, and then good cliffhanger out. All right. Well, now we're getting into segment 2, where we're talking about Star Trek Voyager. This is part 2 of talking about season 5. We're in the 1998-1999 season, which was actually the final season of DS9. And again, the shows had the beautiful distinction of being absolutely nothing alike, which is great. And because they were separated in geography, they didn't necessarily.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of crossover.
They didn't impact each other, which allowed, the fandoms to stay separate.
Except for this episode.
Except for this episode, exactly. Episode 8, I'll kick it off, is called Nothing Human. The director is David Livingston, with a script by Jerry Taylor.
This was her last episode.
Yeah, series co-creator, and her last episode. I had the notes up early, but I don't know exactly why this was her.
I actually didn't see a note as to why. I just saw that this was her last Star Trek episode that she ever wrote.
She ended up moving on from it. So, another interesting fun fact: her son, Alexander Enberg, played Vorik, who was the Vulcan engineer on Voyager, who apparently has an exact cousin named Vorin or something, who appeared in that great season 7 TNG episode where he was also a Vulcan engineer who was an ensign. They must be cousins. I guess
so.
Yeah, so he was Vorik. He was Vorik, and the other guy was Torek. They have to be related. I'm just saying. There's just no way. There's just no way. But yeah, the sidebar. Anyways, this is from December of 1998. A wounded alien is brought aboard from a stranded vessel and attaches itself to B'Elanna Torres. Yikes!
Very nondescriptive synopsis.
Very much so. But they beam on the show, and this alien, which is like a giant earwig, basically. So think about the earwigs from Star Trek II that crawled in Chekhov's ear, and this thing is basically about 4.5 feet long, and it jumps onto B'Elanna kind of like a face hugger, even though it's kind of nestled below her chin, and it's punching into her and punching goo into her. And so, you're right. I have to bring up the summary so I can give you a little bit more. What they have to do is, obviously this happens. B'Elanna ends up in sickbay. She needs some treatment. And the doctor, I love it how he even has to explain that, yes, I'm programmed with all the medical knowledge, but I don't have everything, at immediate access. My buffers aren't that big, so I have to look stuff up. So he has to create a, tutorial program based off of a Cardassian, who ends up as things go by, because we get introduced to a Maquis crewman who was unfortunately in the real world in the past affected by this Moset, who was a kind of a Dr. Kevorkian style death doctor on Bajor during the activation.
That and a mix of Melenga, Josef Melenga from Nazi Germany.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So, this turned into a real serious back and forth where this crewman, what was the crewman's name? I'm forgetting now. Handsome young Bajoran guy. It's got to be in these notes anywhere. Guest cast, help me out here. Was Ensign Tabor. Oh, I thought he was a crewman. But anyway, Tabor is his name. Obviously, he was from Bajor, and he said, "Oh, my grandfather and my cousin were experimented on by this guy." And the doctor makes the point, "Well, this isn't really this guy; it's a program. Why didn't they simply just change the parameters of the hologram to look like somebody else?" Right. I mean, that's the real world answer to be like, everybody chill out. Now he looks like, Mr. Rogers, or he looks like, Bob Ross, but otherwise he looks like this, he looks like this madman. So, doing what Star Trek does best, it puts us into the moral quandary. Well, is it all right for us to benefit from the
questionable science,
the terrible science of this mass murderer, or he wasn't a mass murderer, but I mean he conducted these experiments.
I mean the parallels with the Holocaust are really where this episode ties in.
Correct.
And he was if you look at the behind the scenes notes, Dr. Mengele was definitely one of the main bases for this character.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting concept because in the real world, we kind of go along with Janeway in her ultimate decision, where you have science that is pushed forward by horrific means, absolutely immoral means. But the idea that is bandied about is, one, it's necessary to save B'Elanna's life, right? And that's a similar justification what people use now. But also the justification of you can't let that suffering be for naught. And so it brings that question back up in front, which is not something that, like, when this episode originally released, you would still have some people who are at least vaguely familiar with that
right
cultural struggle back in the 40s and the 50s. But a lot of people, especially like if you're watching it, for instance, for the first time, like yesterday, you wouldn't be aware necessarily of why that's a big deal.
Yeah, true.
And so it's interesting that Star Trek brings this up in a way that doesn't directly reference Earth's past, which is usually when Star Trek does its best,
right?
When it throws a problem onto an alien race,
right?
Because then it stops the navel gazing and then the inherent partisanship that arises because of that, because now it's somewhere else other than humanity.
Right, exactly. So ultimately, this is the only way to save B'Elanna's life. So that's the direction that we lean in.
Yeah. Where B'Elanna's not happy about it.
Right. And the doctor, before he really realizes the full extent of Moset's past, is like, well, maybe I want to keep him around in case I need him anymore. But ultimately, they decide to do away with the program because
he deletes the program and all of the research.
Right.
Which is an interesting choice.
Yeah, which could come up to bite him in the ass. But as you said, the information does exist, but there's the moral quandary about how it was acquired. But what if it was to save them their life again someday? So it's the question that's very difficult to answer.
It's the question that doesn't have a happy answer regardless of how you answer it. Right. Because you have if I delete it because, oh no, it was procured by evil means, I have the moral high ground. But if there was some necessary thing that I could have learned, now I don't have it and someone else could die.
Right.
But if I say, well, I'm keeping it because someone else could die, then I am benefiting from the research of something completely evil. Gotcha. And so that's where you have that conundrum. And there isn't a happy answer to that. There just isn't. And so these are the kinds of episodes that I like, where they don't say like, that's it. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, it's very, very, very cut and dry. Well, speaking of conundrums and don't know if you did the right thing, what's happening in this next episode?
Episode 9, 30 Days, directed by Winrick Colby, story by Scott Miller, teleplay by Kenneth Biller.
Yeah.
Kenneth Biller, aired December 9th of 1998. Tom Paris does his classic disregards orders by helping an aquatic world and is demoted to ensign.
Oh no! Now you're Harry Kim.
Yeah. The interesting thing is the framing of this episode.
Yeah, I thought so too.
With Paris in the brig, and then the whole thing is him writing a letter to Admiral Paris explaining all of the crap that led to him doing this. And I think this is this before? No, I think we've seen Admiral Paris once before this.
That's a good point. We've seen him once in flashback during it was the season 2 episode where hallucinogenic aliens. He was played by an actor called Warren Munson, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but it's not the same.
He also does a voiceover in this. In his actual corporeal appearance, which we get next season in the Pathfinder episode, it is a very well-known character actor, the late Richard Hurd, becomes Admiral Paris. Yes, but not in this one. But
not in this one.
Yeah, so we also get the first and only appearance of the very famous Delaney sisters, the twin sisters, who only appear in the sequence of the Captain Proton program because they're playing the twin sisters of blah, 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 whatever their protagonist or the villainous character. I did read, because it's not really revealed what they do on the ship, but it is revealed in a cutscene that happened that was a reception for the Monian characters, which are the aliens that they encounter, that they're both wearing Science's blue.
Yep.
And I assume they're both ensigns. Or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So, because they're about the same age as Harry. And Harry goes through this whole thing. Well, I'm in love with this one, but the other one likes me, but I really don't like her. And so Tom's like, why can't you just, you love a hologram, you love a Borg, and now you love the wrong twin. There's no luck for this guy. And what sucks is he's got a beautiful girlfriend back home who, at least in beta canon, he gets back together with when they get home. But in alpha canon, who knows? Because we never see him again after the end of Voyager, or we haven't yet. But I've met Garrett a number of times, and he's a very, very nice guy. So I have my hopes for him.
Here's hoping. I was hoping he was going to appear in Prodigy, but he hasn't.
Bummer. The whole story is framed around, they bump into this race. Their world is an artificially gravitized ocean with a kind of a barrier keeping it together. And it's, of course, in typical fashion, it's malfunctioning. And Starfleet's like, we've got tech, we can help. And in doing this, what do they discover when they go into the depths of the ocean in the flyer? What do they find?
It's been a hot minute since I watched this one, so I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm scrolling through.
That's okay. Well, if I'm not mistaken, and again, I watched it last week too, they go down there and they find out that there's a reactor that is that pulled all the surface water from a nearby planet in order to create this. I'm just reading from the summary. In order to create this ocean for unknown reasons, which further exploration reveals oxygen mining reactors using by the current population that are causing water loss. So one of the Monians, who's played by character actor Willie Horton, you've seen him in a bunch of other stuff, conspires with Paris against the orders of the captain, who's like, well, this is a prime directive situation. We should get back on the road. He's like, Captain, I really want to help these people out because they're exploiting this thing and that thing, and I want to do the right thing. She says no. So he gets together with Willie Horton, and they steal the flyer, and they're going to go down there and shoot a missile at it, and Voyager blows up that missile at the last minute, and Paris gets caught.
Yep.
There's your quickie summmer.
Yep. He defies orders.
Exactly.
For what he thinks are good reasons.
Exactly. But Janeway disagrees. But again, sticking to the prime directive.
It's interesting how the prime directive gets applied here, because this is not a pre-warp civilization per se. So,
right. Yeah, but it's not. I guess it's not cut and dry enough for Janeway to say that, like, hey, I can really see that, you're hurting this person or that person or whatever it is, but it's an artificial environment that they're just like, we can't really do any good helping out here, but they just kind of move on from it. So I don't know. I mean, do you think Janeway was wrong? I mean, if you were her, would you have done it differently? Because it's not like it's like Return of the Archons from the original series, which I watched recently just for a giggle. But it's like in that, it was an unnatural situation that Kirk said, plus his own people were in danger. And so he had to undo it. But that's not what was going on here. Voyager was completely unaffected because they could just be like, which is the case with a lot of stuff in this series. They're like, well, we're just passing by. Yeah. And these Monians didn't ask Voyager to fix the situation per se. No. They just wanted a tweak with like, hey, we want to know what's going on. And they didn't know anything about the artificial reactor thingy that was holding the water all together. So, I don't know. I can understand why she wouldn't want to get involved.
Yeah, I think she might be right in the sense that it's kind of up to them to figure out what to do with that, since it affects them directly, and they have to deal with whatever consequences happen from doing that. So in that sense, I think that she's right. I'm not sure about the moral standing of it, but I think that was the right call. And also because she just needed to tell Tom, you can't just do whatever you want.
Right.
So as a discipline thing, it kind of makes sense. As much as that sort of thing sucks, and we don't like seeing characters being punished for doing what they think is the right thing,
right?
Or, people being punished for doing the right thing.
Right.
Sometimes it happens, and sometimes it's just because that's just the law, and that's just what we got to do.
Well, and it takes us back in contrast to what we were talking about a moment ago about Starfleet not being the military per se, where in this it's still a hierarchical chain of command.
Well, it still functions like a military. Like I said earlier, like you can't just take off the badge after you do something stupid and expect to get out of the consequences. He was wearing the badge and the uniform when he did it. Right. So because he was an acting member of Starfleet and everyone saw that happen as an acting member of Starfleet, you have to take responsibility for it.
Right. So that's
just what happens here.
So he becomes an ensign for the next season and a half. Sorry about the spoiler, but he does eventually get his half pip back, but it's at the end of next season. So something to look forward to. But yeah, I liked it. And again, Tom Paris is always a character I've enjoyed.
I like Tom Paris.
I think it was definitely.
But I think this was like good introspective character stuff for him, which was, I enjoy when they do that. Yes, it's not, linear like people like television nowadays, but it's good for character writing when you're able to take a breath. So
agreed. All right, next one's yours. Or was that one mine?
I think this next one's yours.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, we're not going to do the playback, so if we're wrong, sorry.
Yeah.
Episode 10 is Counterpoint. Les Landau directing, Michael Taylor doing the writing from December of 98. While passing through Devore space, I feel like Devore is an alien that we bumped into before, or we've had something that sounded like Devore. That was the problem when Star Trek had been on for for 11 years at this point continuously, is that all the aliens just ended up sounding a whole lot alike.
I think this was the first time that we came into contact.
Gotcha. But the first and last, I don't feel like we see him again. Voyager is routinely searched for telepaths. So you get a race that is extremely xenophobic, at least against races with telepathy. And I'm trying to remember exactly what their major malfunction is about telepaths. Let's see here. Yes. The main dude is Inspector Kashyyyk, or Kashyyyk, if you prefer. I didn't think he was that hairy, though. He does these routine inspections where, our people know that they're outmatched because these Devore ships are almost twice the size of Voyager. And they travel in packs of 2 or 3.
They believed that telepaths were incapable of trust.
Right.
That you're incapable of trusting them.
Right. So as a result, telepathy is illegal, and it's revealed that. And so what Janeway has to do is take our telepathic crew members, which are Tuvok and Vorik, both Vulcans, and then random
have a Betazoid.
They have a random Betazoid, and then they make mention of Suter, who we know was a Betazoid, who was a Maquis, and he was a murderer, and he ended up dying in the season 3 premiere in order to save the ship. There was a last. I'm skimming through these notes trying to remind myself, but there was one more character, and also Voyager along the way had picked up 10 or 15 refugees from some ship that were again on the run. So this kind of turns into a long game episode. They pass the first inspection, they go on their way, and then Kashyyyk shows up again on his own. And he said, "Oh, I've left the military and I'm on the run, and I want to help you." And so he joins the crew, and he gets real chummy with Janeway, and he says, "Hey, if you go to blah 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 coordinates, you can jump through this wormhole, whatever it is." And they get real cozy. Then he's going to beam off, and they have a kiss, and you're like, "Oh, I don't know." And then what happens? It's the old switcheroo, because he shows back up with the bad guys back in uniform, and he's like, "I fooled you. Show me your telepaths." And when they unbeam the telepaths, it's just cargo containers, because Janeway didn't trust them all along, and they already sent the telepaths on their way, but then also managed to stow our people, the other 4 crew members, somewhere else.
Probably back in the transporter buffer where they were hiding most
in a different corner. Yes, they put them on like a flash drive on a thumbstick.
Yeah, they Scottied them. They Genolaned them.
Yeah, they stuck them in a flash drive somewhere, and they were fine. So, it was. Janeway really pulled it out, because she. Who knows? Did she really have feelings for this guy? Was the whole thing a big fake out?
I don't know. I'm not sure. It almost feels like this was one of those moments where, because there was talk when Voyager was first coming out that Janeway was going to be the female Kirk. Right. And so in that sense, this could be one of those moments where that kind of came to be, because Kirk often used his charm and what have you to try to get what he wanted from members of the opposite sex. Right. And so this is Janeway doing the same thing, which I find interesting, because if she's not using, if she doesn't actually have feelings for him, and she's just like, okay, this is what I have to do to try to make sure that my people survive. That's a very classic Kirk move, and also very, very shrewd. You're right. Yeah. So.
No, she's sharp. There's a reason why she is, without a doubt, a lot of people's, favorite captain in the modern era, for different reasons. Because if you look at her, Sisko, and Picard, they are all great in ways, to me, that are all completely independent. What I mean?
They're all very different.
Yeah, and they all bring something, very different to the table. So, so I like this. You're right. This was Janeway's cunning and playing a bit of a long game and outsmarting an alien who clearly thought he was very crafty. So, definitely. Yeah.
It's definitely a funny moment where it's like, haha, I have you. No, you don't.
No, you don't. Yeah, exactly.
Surprise, you do not.
All right. Well, cool. All right, we'll take us on to episode 11.
All right, episode 11 is Latent Image, directed by Mike Vihar, story by Eileen Connors, Brandon Braga, and Joe Menosky, teleplay by Joe Menosky, aired January 20th, first one of 1999.
Ooh, 1999!
The Doctor finds out that some of his memories have been blocked, specifically regarding the death of a crew member.
Right, yeah, he finds out. It's so funny because he's playing with his stupid holo camera, which is about the size of like a hardcover book, I guess, or maybe even a little bit bigger. And it's weird because today we take pictures on our phones and they're very sophisticated. But don't forget that we have World War III, and obviously technology is reduced to the Stone Age, so we have to start all over again.
Well, we also have the Romulan War and all these other things that could have reduced technology.
That's very true.
So,
but obviously, the most reasonable explanation is this was 1999, and the producer of the show thought something like that looked futuristic, which of course it does.
Also, we have to take into account that it is a holographic camera, meaning that it is taking all sorts of different measurements that a normal camera doesn't do.
Exactly, which is what he's working on. He's using it as a medical device, so he's doing like headshots of people in the surgical bay and sick bay. And in doing this, he finds out that Ensign Kim has a weird weird injury and a surgery that the doctor performed because he can tell it's a technique he developed. And so this all starts to unravel as he's trying to track who,
he finds memory of a woman, of an ensign that he can't remember, Ensign Chital.
And as this goes back, we find out that it's Janeway that deleted his memories. And when it finally comes down to it, and a lot of this episode is told in flashback. We get to meet Ensign Chital. We jump backward to the very tail end of season 3 because they give a star date. So this is like between worst case scenario and Scorpion Part 1. So it is like literally, this would be the penultimate episode of season 3. So no 7 of 9, but there's also should be Kess, and there's no Kess because obviously Jennifer Lane wasn't. I don't think she was on speaking terms with the Star Trek people at this point because it was not a great ending to her time on the show. But they do manage to, at least for continuity's sake, they give Paris his pip back, but they don't change his hairstyle. So it's like something. Oh, they also screw up Tuvok's rank because he was only a lieutenant at that point. He got his promotion at the beginning of season 4. So nitpicking away.
There's always something that gets missed, which is
and you also have to remember that it's a recollection. Think about your own memories. There's always going to be
something you miss.
Even though he's a computer program, there's always going to be something that's a little bit awry. But he found out that because Chital and Harry and the Doctor were all on a mission together. A random alien attacks. He shoots all 3 of them. Both Harry and Chital are horribly injured. They both beam back to the ship, and the Doctor finds himself in a spot where he can only save one of the 2 of them. Now, of course, if Kess was there, she probably could have helped, but maybe she was on vacation. I have no idea. So obviously he saves Harry because Harry's a member of the cast, but it's interesting how he brings up and he says, when the Doctor's having this feedback loop, he's like, did I save him because he's my friend? And I didn't really know Chital that well, but how could I do that? Because I'm a doctor and blah, blah, blah. And he's stroking out. So the decision is made to delete that entire memory engram sequence. But Harry also, and everyone is then sworn to secrecy. So Harry, obviously, when he wakes up, they're like, this happened with the Doctor, and you're going to have to, it's one of those Omega directive things that like, you're never going to be able to talk about it. But so I liked the way that this went because at the end of it, they realized that the Doctor is just going to have to, like any person is, they're going to have to deal with it. Yeah, they're going to have to therapize him, and he's going to have to deal with it. So you get this great sequence where the Doctor's on the holodeck, and all of our regular cast characters are taking turns sitting with him and talking about his feelings and talking things through. And it's not like a sitcom where at the end of it it's like, and now I'm just fine. At the end of it,
it ends with him still sitting pensively on the holodeck as Janeway walks out.
Janeway's napping, and she's like, we're going to get through this and blah blah. It reminds me of the end of the TNG episode A Mind's Eye with Geordi, and he's brainwashed by the Romulans, and he's talking to Troy, and he's like, but I remember everything, and I remember, we had this, I was with this girl, and we were at this Andorian waiter, and he didn't get our drinks right or something, and she's like, I know you don't believe that these are false memories, but they are, but we're going to work through it. It's going to take time. And that was a very satisfactory, like I said, non-sitcom-y kind of answer, because I don't know if, I grew up in the 80s, which was the heyday of sitcoms. Every sitcom, at the end of it, Punky Brewster or The Facts of Life, there was always like and now everything's fine again, even if it was something terrible, like there was a child being molested or something, which happened on an episode of Different Strokes. At the end of it, it was okay. Where life doesn't work like that. Problems go on and you have to resolve them over time. So I thought that was really well done. So I would definitely say this was, of the batch, this was definitely a top contender without a doubt.
Yeah, I think this is another good one. It's interesting that the two of the really, really good episodes so far, I mean, the previous one with Tom Paris is also good.
Yeah.
But this one's interesting because it's another doctor episode where he has to struggle with something kind of a medical ethics sort of question.
Right.
This one is the, did I save someone because I know them?
Right. Right. Exactly.
And that's something that doctors have to deal with, not tons of times, I don't think.
Triage, but a doctor is working alone.
If you look at something, if you look at war movies or things like that, where you have my friend showed up and his arm's been blown off, he's bleeding out, and we got someone who's got a concussion but's probably going to be live, but they need immediate attention.
Yeah,
or your friend's going to die. It's well, that's the way that it is.
You're right.
And so this is just taking the other side of that, of well, your friend is the one that does have the slightly higher chance of survival, and so that's what you do,
right?
But then you second guess yourself because someone dies, and that's horrific. So it's just interesting how we get yet another doctor episode that has to do with medical ethics, and then his and then the consequences of that, pretty shortly after another one. But this one again is also really, really well done. It handles the doctor's character very well, and then the ultimate decision of allowing him to integrate those memories and having to deal with them. It's interesting that 7 of 9 is the one who kind of argues for that, because
right, where she's just in the nascent portion of discovering her own humanity,
right?
And then she draws those parallels right back to Janeway when debating the ethics of this, with some of the best ethical conversations in this show definitely happen with Jerry Ryan as part of the cast, interacting with Kate Mulgrew, which is interesting because famously those two actresses really clash, and a lot of people really clash because they were very resentful for Jerry coming on board the show because she was added as kind of the sex kitten, but really ended up being such a wonderful character.
But the character was really well written, but it's just interesting how it doesn't quite boil down to the fact that Janeway wants a functioning doctor because they need one, right? And 7 of 9 argues that he's a person, and you need to allow that to be a thing,
right?
Whereas Janeway unconsciously, I think, falls back on he's a computer program, and I can just reset him if he breaks. And it's just an interesting moment where you have this character, this person is not. They have this switch that isn't quite a human thing that allows me to take advantage of them. And the argument is you really shouldn't do that. You might think it's good for them, but it really isn't. And we see how even removing those memories does leave holes, does leave broken parts in the doctor as a person. And hilariously, it ties back to Star Trek V. Where you sometimes need that darkness, you sometimes need that pain.
I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain.
Yeah, you sometimes that pain is necessary to help you grow as a person.
Trust me, as someone who's gone through some really rough times in my life, and I mean, you know a little bit about my backstory, but trust me, you don't want to know the rest of it. All of that has, I think, made me the person I am today, and got me ready to and prepared to be a good dude and to lead a good life. But you can't pick and choose wiping out unpleasant experiences and think that because if you don't learn anything from what you do, then you don't grow.
We learn from our mistakes. We learn from our bad experiences, and as horrific as they are, as much as they should not have happened, they did. And so you gotta deal with it. You gotta learn from it. And they do make us better people, ultimately. Correct. As much as that sucks. It's just the way that it is.
Oh, I totally agree. All right. Well, let's move right along. The Bride of Chaotica. Is this
I
me?
love
This is me.
episode.
This is me.
you.
This is good stuff. Alan Craker, who is getting into kind of his glory, directing Voyager, directing DS9, and he's a director who's spoken very fondly of by Robbie and Garrett on the Delta Flyers podcast. They absolutely love him. Story by Brian Fuller, teleplay again by Brian Fuller and Michael Taylor. So you've got so representing the best of the writing team writing this one. Again from January of 1999, Paris's latest Adventures of Captain Proton holodeck program takes an unexpected turn. And yeah, this is good. So yeah, we get most of the episode told within the Captain Proton program because they run into your very run of the mill. We ran into I think it was a space sandbar in this case. They got stuck in a fold of subspace and they couldn't get out, which that happened in that episode of TNG, I think The Loss with Troy, where she temporarily lost her powers because they were stuck in a two-dimensional wave or something.
Two-dimensional alien eddy where they're getting dragged along by two-dimensional beings.
Yeah, so this is very similar, but they were stuck. And then the aliens who are part and parcel of this manifest themselves on the holodeck as like a couple of they look like FBI agents, and they've got to work through actually connecting with Dr. Chaotica, who's the villain in the program, by getting him to help them out in order to put the thing on the other thing in order to help Voyager get out. So it does necessitate Janeway taking part in this program, which of course she finds ridiculous, but she's Arachnia, Queen of the Spider Women. I actually pulled April in to watch this episode with me because she's such a huge Janeway fan. And I'm like, you're going to want to sit in on this one because
this was hilariously one of the episodes that actually got me to start watching Voyager regularly.
Yeah.
Because I had seen like one or two episodes before. And I mean, this was well after Voyager was off the air, but I went to a Star Trek watch party in college. And this was one of the episodes that we watched. Yeah. And it was one of those this is legitimately hysterical. If the writing is like this, then I want to watch this show. And I know that this is a completely just random episode that does really dumb things that are just ridiculous. But it's a good one.
It is, and it's a very much low stakes. It's kind of a one and done kind of episode where we just get to have some fun. It
does end with Chaotica doing his I know, and Chaotica will return.
He's a great villain because he's the typical widow's peak with the goatee and the weird skin tight helmet thing. His henchman is a character actor who I remember from there was a 1982 version of the DC Comics character Swamp Thing, which actually starred Adrian Bourbeau, who was a heartthrob in the 70s. And he was a main, because he has that look of a henchman heavy kind of guy. And I looked that actor up and he's since passed away, but I just he's from Swamp Thing. I remember now. A super fun episode. Not a hell of a lot more to say about it. But the Captain Proton was a great diversion, but I believe this is the last time we see it because we saw it in the season premiere. We saw it in 30 days because we had the framing sequence with the Delaney sisters, and then we get this, and I think that's it. And maybe they kind of broomed it before it overstayed its welcome because we get Fairhaven next, the little Irish seaside village that's a big part of next season, and that also seems like they did it 3 times and they get rid of it because let's face it, they didn't. Even the Dixon Hill programs, we got maybe 3 or 4 times total. And that's enough because you don't want to have it's not we're Q's back this season, so we're doing another one of those. So I think if you would have a holodeck program that would be ongoing to the point that you would see it several times every season, I think it'd get very stale. So I think you got to, just like reading a book. Once you read a book, most people don't, I'm going to start reading this book again. It's just, you cycle through it and you move on. So this was a good way to wrap up Captain Proton because it was fun, but again, it was kind of easy listening, kind of some of the greatest hits. I thought it was a good way to wrap it up. Myself.
Yeah. It's a good episode though. It's just fun.
Most def. All right. Well, take us home with episode 13. I liked this one very much.
Episode 13, Gravity. directed by Terry Wendell, story by Jimmy Diggs, Brian Fuller, and Nick Sagan, teleplay by Nick Sagan and Brian Fuller, aired February 3rd of 1999. Tuvok and Paris crash on a planet stuck in a pocket of subspace where they meet a female named Nos.
If I'm not very much mistaken, and I'll click on this link to verify, I do believe that Nick Sagan is the son or some other kind of relation of Carl Sagan, the famous
Carl Sagan is his father.
Yep. I knew it was something like that. So, and we do get, I opened the link, we do get a great appearance by an older actor named Joseph Ruskin, who was Galt, the original bad guy from the Gamesters of Triskelion in the original series. 20 quatloos for the newcomer. In a framing sequence where we see Tuvok. I did the math on this. Tuvok was born in 2264, which was just prior to the beginning of the original series. If you figured in these flashback appearances, he was maybe 15. That would have been taking place during the TOS films, the early portion of it, because we do know that in 2293, he was an ensign serving on the Excelsior under the command of Sulu. So there's a little insider knowledge for you. So guest star in this episode is actress Lori Petty, who in the 90s was very, very famous for being in Point Break, for being in a little indie Australian film called Tank Girl. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was a cult classic back in the day. And more recently has starred in Orange is the New Black on Netflix, which was a great show about a woman's prison. Somewhat satirical take on a woman's prison, if you can imagine. But she was Also with Kate Mulgrew, you're absolutely right. Put them back together, even though they don't really share any scenes in this episode.
Yeah, they're not in this.
This was
really in this episode.
Most of the Voyager crew is not. This was an absolutely because they're gone for 2 months, but in Voyager time it was 2 days, or longer than that. So absolutely great. Tuvok is one of my favorite Voyager characters because he's our first pure-blooded Vulcan that we get. He's very by the book. The framing sequence from his youth is he's talking about as a teenager, he's not yet mastered his emotional control. He's in love with this girl at his school, but she doesn't return his affections, and he's having a blowout over it. So his parents essentially send him to a Vulcan shrink, as it were, to kind of get him to get his shit together. And and at the end of it, because we do see at the end of the framing sequence, he does as a teenager, he manages to get it under wraps. But this episode, over this 2-month period, where it's Paris and Tuvok, and then of course they happen to have the Doctor along. Tuvok develops a very close relationship with this Nos. She's very affectionate towards him. He can't return her feelings. She doesn't really get it. Even Paris is like, dude, she's into you. We may die here. Why don't you just hook up with her? And he's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm a Vulcan. We don't do that. He says, what's his line? He says, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not currently experiencing Panfar. And I was like, that's just snotty. Come on, bro. But he's right. Yeah. I mean, it's not the Vulcan way, which of course has totally gotten thrown out the window in Strange New Worlds with Spock.
Talk about that in the context of Voyager.
Yeah, exactly correct. But again, Spock is also part human. And Tuvok is 100% dyed in the wool super Vulcan. But, eventually, obviously, like any episode, they get rescued. Nos comes with them, and they're going to send her on her way. And Tuvok does, with the two of them in that final scene. There's a mind
meld in the end.
He melds with her and then shares that, yes, indeed, I have feelings for you too, but this is what that means to me. I loved it. I thought it was extremely well done. Mm-hmm. I always hate a made-up Star Trek language that just sounds like people going because they have a little problem with the Universal Translator's beginning. So Nos's language is particularly grating to the ears, but eventually, obviously, it gets resolved. I love it how Paris and Tuvok, they have to retune their comm badges for the UT to lock on her language, but the Doctor gets it right away because he's a computer. So and he's because of his mobile emitter is even more advanced, and that's why he's able to be there.
Yeah, this is also one of those fun episodes where the jumpsuit suddenly can separate and do all these interesting things.
It not only does that, but it also unzips the turtleneck.
Yeah, the turtleneck,
so the underlayer zips down the front. And one thing that I particularly love, and again, Peter and I are big time customers, I love, and you see several times this season, and even in this block of episodes, the short sleeved undershirt that has the ribbing down the middle up to the neck. I want a shirt like that, but it's a crew neck shirt, much like what I'm wearing now, but there would be ribbing down the sides. I want one. But yeah, that's not an easy one to find. But yeah, I do love how the jumpsuit becomes a jacket and the rear zipping mock turtleneck becomes a front zipping model mock turtleneck, much like what they have over on DS9. But there's no seam. So yeah. But you know what? It's the future.
It's future technology. I just thought it was. I just think it's hilarious that when that happens.
I do. So. It always makes me chuckle because, again, as the audience, you're not supposed to notice or care. But this is Star Trek. Everybody notices and everybody cares.
Everybody pays attention to the details.
Yeah,
that is the danger when you make a Star Trek anything. Is everyone pays attention to the details.
But yeah, this one really nailed it for me. I was glad to see Tuvok. And especially in the context of what happened in his youth, the fact that he does balance the internal struggle, but he's able to express it. But he doesn't, like have a guy-to-guy moment with Paris because he doesn't see Paris as an equal. He's not a Vulcan. He's not a Vulcan. He's not he's not a someone who he would share that with, because Vulcans are very we don't talk about our feelings. If we ever really need somebody, we get that from a family member. We don't go to outsiders. We don't go to someone who's not a Vulcan. So I love seeing Tuvok sticking to his guns and sticking to his Vulcanness. Tim Russ, Peter and I have talked about this, is actually somebody that he and I are hoping to interview at some point in the future, because we did make connections with him. We've just not set up time to do that. But again, plug for the Patreon. Anytime we do one of our Secret Friends Unite Spotlight, that does typically show up on our Patreon first. So I would say probably within the next 3 to 6 months, I get the feeling that Peter and I will be sitting down to talk with very experienced and an awesome dude, Tim Russ, about his Star Trek experience and all that good stuff. So, but with that is the end of talking about these episodes. So, Peter, let's have a favorite and a least favorite out of this group.
I want to go with Bride of Chaotica, but I won't because it's such a bottle episode.
Right.
I'm going to go with Nothing Human, because I like a lot of the moral conundrum that goes on there.
Star Trek's best. Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the best. I mean, Jerry Taylor's a fantastic writer. So it's a really, really good episode. Really, really well done. So
right. Agreed. All right. And a worst? It gets tough because everybody's got kind of an emotional journey in every one of these episodes.
Yeah, the thing is, there's a lot of good stuff in all of them. So, if I had to pick one, it might be 30 Days. Just if I had to, forced to pick one, that's probably the one I would pick.
Right. I agree. Just because in a lot of ways it's kind of they could have just left he could have left it alone altogether and it would have been no issue at all. I think I'm balancing when it comes to where I'll do it in reverse. When it comes to my least favorite, I would either pick 30 Days for that reason, or I might pick Counterpoint.
That's kind of where I was waffling.
Even though it's great to see Janeway kind of Kirk a moment where she's got a big plan, I feel like the motivation of these Devore aliens is kind of stupid. Like, oh, we don't like telepaths. It's just regular racism, I guess. So I guess it's not really that stupid.
I mean, racism is stupid. So it kind of,
Yeah, but you look at how we struggle with it, here on planet Earth, and particularly in this country. But without a doubt, as I was discussing, Gravity is probably my favorite. I love to see the depth of the Tuvok character. One of the core races of all of Star Trek, obviously the Vulcans, and then having the perspective of seeing that he's dedicated to Vulcan principles, but he still has a soft side, and it's nice to see it, even if he expresses it in a very unique way. So well, good. All right, well, next episode we will get into the third of fourth blocks of season 5, but with that,
and the last bit of PRODIGY.
Exactly. Yeah. So tune in next time. As always, the mailbag is open to you, secretfriendsunite@gmail.com. Drop us some thoughts about this episode. Drop us some thoughts about anything at all, not only related to Star Trek, but anything you're enjoying in geek fandom. And we may feature your comments on an upcoming episode of any one of our shows. Of course, we talk Star Trek here, but I also talk to my partner, Mark, about Star Wars. Peter's a frequent guest. Mark and Todd talk about video games on co-op mode, and Todd and I talk every week for the past decade. We're now celebrating 10 years this month that we've been doing Secret Friends Unite. And we're almost about to hit episode 500, which is absolutely incredible. But at any rate, plug. That is the end of the episode. Peter, where do people find you out there?
You can find me around the interwebs at Petrus Aquinas. Generally not terribly active, but you can find me on the Discord for both Secret Friends Unite, Grand Petoskey, and Trekkers of Michigan. You can find me there. Otherwise, you can find me on ELH's Twitch and YouTube channel, where I am playing a Cardassian science officer in a Star Trek Adventures game.
Definitely not Mosset, though.
Not Mosset. No, I'm not medically inclined. And you can also find me behind the scenes on Starship Excelsior.
Totally awesome. Well, I am also on those exact same Discords. United Trekkers of Michigan is just a Discord that my wife April and I started. It's just a place to talk about Star Trek. We'd love to have you on board no matter where you live. I can also be found on Instagram and on Threads at the C3, TheCeeThree. Hit me up. Let me know what you're thinking about Star Trek, Star Wars, or anything related to geek culture. We would love to have you weigh in so we can feature your comments on our shows. But with that, friends, as always, thank you for joining us. I'm going to tell you that sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
Peace and long life.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.